Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We have a great show for you today on GoJo and Golic. The second edition of the college football playoff rankings is out, and there's some wrinkles in there. We will go through that. Plus, NBA Cup action returned last night. We'll go through everything that happened and what's going on in Chicago. The Bears fired offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. COURTNEY CRONIN will join us to break down everything that's going on in the Windy City. All that and more coming your way in just a few minutes.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. Delighted to have Jesse Cofield back here with us. We got a great show for everyone here. As always, we are presented by Campbell's Chunky, the soup that eats like a meal. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, which again includes our new YouTube channel. Check out the GoJo and Golic YouTube channel. Subscribe, hit the bell, and get ready to go. Thank you to everyone who tunes in on there each and every day to watch us. COURTNEY CRONIN, as mentioned, going to stop by and help us break down where the Bears go from here. Now, you heard some of the interesting reports from the guys at Waddle and Sylvie in Chicago saying that there were Bears players advocating for Tyson Bagent to go in there and get some run right now, maybe sit down the star rookie quarterback. COURTNEY has documented all of the coordinators that the Bears decided against that have now gone on to great success. To do any of those names get a re-up as maybe head coaching candidates now for the Chicago Bears if the season keeps going the way it is. Mark Schlabach is also going to join us, ESPN college football writer and reporter, not only to break down the college football playoff rankings from last night that we'll get to here, but what the status is for Nico Iamaleava, the star quarterback for the Tennessee Vols. It's in concussion protocol right now ahead of that game against Georgia. And in like 20 minutes here, Mike Williams, Steelers wide receiver who just came over from the Jets and ho-hum caught the game-winning touchdown. I'm going to have to ask him, and Dad, I know this is going to really mean nothing to you because this is way too deep internet, but he posted a picture of him catching the game-winning touchdown and then put hashtag Redline on there, which last time on Dragon Ball Z was something that Aaron Rodgers referenced in the post game when him and Mike Williams failed to connect in that final drive and mentioned him having to stay on the red line, kind of threw him under the bus. A lot of people thinking that was shade. So I know you've been dying to get the answer to that question here as deep in the internet streets as you are.
You know what, but I'm going to let you ask the question, even though I had formulated my question to talk about the red line and, the whole thing, and I didn't understand it a bit. So you go ahead and ask that one because I'll screw it up.
All right, perfect. There we go. We'll handle that business. In the meantime, we can get to the business of the college football playoff because that was the big news of last night. The committee got together for a second time after we had seen a bunch of turmoil from the prior weekend. Georgia goes down. LSU goes down. Miami finally loses after playing with fire for the entirety of this season. And so now we're in a very interesting situation, Dad, where for the first time, because of that Georgia loss, we're dealing with the inevitable part of this that I was waiting for to see how people would react. The new top 12 in the college football playoff committee rankings is as follows. Oregon and Ohio State still 1 and 2, followed by now number 3 Texas, number 4 Penn State, number 5 Indiana, and then BYU, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Miami at 9, Alabama jumping up to 10, Ole Miss all the way up to number 11 from 16, and Georgia now moves down to 12, Dad, just ahead of one-loss Boise State. And so because of that, and ESPN every week as they put the rankings up also shows you if the season ended today, this is what the bracket would look like. And this is the scenario that makes me wonder how long this format would exist, Dad, because in this scenario, 2-loss Georgia would be bumped by Boise State. Boise State, the highest-ranked Group of 5 champion as it sits right now, would get an automatic bid into the tournament and then would be the 12 seed since they weren't one of the 4 highest ranked conference champs that would get a bye. And so this is the one, Dad, that I think would test the limits of this system. The Group of 5 before the season was worried about, hey, what's our future look like if the Power 4 decide to push us out of this playoff process? Do we need to have something planned on our own? And I don't know how it's going to sit with Greg Sankey and the SEC brass if one of their big name brands in Kirby Smart gets bumped out of the dance so that Boise State can have a seat at the table.
Well, I mean, I think that we hold off on that, because I think by the end of this, Boise State will actually be in the top 12, so they won't bump anybody out. They're one spot away from it. Teams in the top 12 are still playing one another, so there could be a team that drops back or a couple of teams that drops back, and Boise State would move up into the top 12. So I would hold off on that. It looks bad now because that's what we see. We see number 12 getting bumped, number 12 getting bumped, but I do think Boise State will end up being in the top 12. So I think that part of the equation will take care of itself.
I think you're probably right, and that's the case with most of this stuff, but it's just interesting to think about because, again, this is not a system that's something that is set in stone and that we're going to have forever. This is one that before the ink was even dry on the 12-team playoff, you already had teams pushing for 14. You had the SEC and the Big Ten pushing for more, and Dad, you can see why, because even though they don't get automatic bids, the biggest takeaway from what we've seen through the first 2 weeks is just how much the committee weights being in the Big Ten and being in the SEC, and it manifests in very different ways. You look now, the Big Ten occupies 4 of the top 5 spots in the college football playoff rankings, with number 3 Texas being the highest ranked SEC school, and that for the Big Ten is due to the fact that these teams have gotten to feast on a lesser conference on the bottom half. There aren't teams like South Carolina that you've got to worry about stepping on in the Big Ten as readily as you do in the SEC. And so for all these teams that have gone through largely weaker schedules and then only had played each other and played each other close, Ohio State and Penn State playing a close game, Ohio State and Oregon playing a close game, how Indiana fares when they go and visit the Buckeyes in November, also going to factor into that, because the committee's basically saying, all right, you played in the Big Ten, you played close against a couple other teams that we think are good, and we're going to keep moving you up here in the rankings, a la Penn State, who still hasn't beaten anyone that any of us look at and go, wow, that feels impressive and like validation of this football team. And in the SEC, you've got a gaggle of teams with 2 losses so robust that it's given way to the ultimate doomsday apocalyptic potential 3-loss SEC team making the playoff by winning the SEC championship theory that I saw Greg McElroy ascribe on his podcast the other day. And that's all because, hey, we look at the strength of this conference, all these teams near the top in strength of schedule, near the top in strength of resume, what their path looks like is viewed as so daunting that the committee lifts them up. And so what we end up with is 4 Big Ten teams, almost 5 SEC teams if you were to count Georgia in the field of 12 right now. And so it's a pretty clear message from the committee that those 2 conferences are viewed completely differently.
Well, yeah, they are. And I first off, I think you have to have conference champions getting something, or what's the value of a conference championship, right? I mean,
Dad, in the 4-team playoff, conference championships were a plot point. They were a data point that got factored in,
right,
but they weren't an automatic buy into the dance. And so I was going to ask you, do you think that? Because we went to Notre Dame. We were conference agnostic. I laughed at the conference people and their silly problems that they got so they could gaggle together and get TV money. And now we're getting to the point where people who wanted conference championships to matter, buddy, you're going to get it, but it makes for some funky math down the stretch with teams that we're talking about like Boise State, like Colorado, who's got an opportunity. And in this scenario where a couple of teams lose the right way and the SEC's got a bunch of teams knotted with 2 conference losses, and that includes LSU, who's got 3, but one of them was to USC at the beginning of the season, where you could have LSU with a path to the conference championship game based on a tiebreaker scenario, and now you've got a 3-loss team in the playoffs. So you're for the conference champion getting an automatic bid, Dad, yes?
Well, I'm for scenarios. You can have a conference championship mean something. You can not count a group of 5 team as an automatic bid. You can say they have to be in the top 12. You could do that. And also, if you want to start counting all the plot points, go back to the computer. Go back to the computer. Don't put it in the 13 human beings' hands. Put it in the computer's hands that takes all these data points, doesn't do, the eye test, and just puts in the data points. Now, remember, when we had the 4 playoff teams, a lot of times the computer would spit out the same 4 that the committee had. So there wasn't a big variation. But with a top 12, I think there would be a little more of a variation because of the different plot points that a computer would use that human beings wouldn't use. So there are scenarios. Get rid of the conference champion. block out the group of 5 completely, which obviously would tick off the group of 5, and that would be the start of the separation of the Power 4 and the group of 5. Or, again, go back to the computer. Let the computer put all the info in the computer and let the computer spit out your top 12. I mean, there are ways. I know this way isn't in stone, but there are ways to course correct if you don't like the first iteration of it. Now, I don't know how many iterations we're going to get before we go to a 14 or a 16 team. We're talking about, what, 26 in 2026, changing it again. But there are things to change. But overall, I do like the conference champ getting something. As I said, what's the value of a conference championship if there isn't some meaning behind it? So that I would probably less inclined to get rid of that. And I would be, even though when I'm done in the media, I want to be on this 13-person committee. And I really think, all kidding aside, I could be on this 13-person committee because I love watching football and I would love watching the tape and love watching the games. But if you really want to just put data points in, throw it in the computer and let the computer spit out your rankings.
I will say, as I think through this now, I hold 2 thoughts in my head. One is, I've always kind of scoffed at the notion that a conference championship means all that much in this day and age. And right now, if you look at this selfishly from the perspective of someone who roots for an independent team like Notre Dame, who, by the way, moved up to 8 in the college football playoff poll last night. They are now behind 1-loss Tennessee and in front of 1-loss Miami. So the committee looking at common opponent there. Miami's lost to Georgia Tech, Notre Dame's win versus Georgia Tech, and apparently that NIU loss far enough in the rearview mirror where now they get credit for going out and accomplishing since then. And you saw that pop up at a couple of places, Dad. We're starting to get to the point where common opponent not going to be the only data point that matters, or even head-to-head. It mattered with Kansas State in front of Colorado at 16 and 15, where Kansas State, or 16 and 17, excuse me, where Kansas State was ranked above Colorado because they played in the middle of October and Kansas State won that game. But you look a little bit further down at South Carolina and LSU, and South Carolina now ranked ahead of LSU, who's dropped there, even though they played. But that game's so long ago at this point now that in the eyes of committee, it's one data point, but not the only one that's going to matter or be considered. And that's kind of how I always viewed conference championships, Dad. It should matter, but should it be the defining trait? And if you are a team like Notre Dame that's an independent trying to find your place in this field in the at-large bids, the automatic qualifier for a conference championship presents some problems because now you've got a team like Colorado that may not have the ranking that could win their conference championship and then actually be the reason the Big 12 gets 2 teams in. If now BYU, who's sitting at 6, loses that game in the conference championship, loses a close one, can only be penalized so much for playing in an extra game because they've played so well. And now when you look at their resume, sits at number 2 in strength of resume, the metric that everybody likes so much. And so that makes problems for Notre Dame by having an automatic bid for the teams that win, not just a bump in the rankings.
Yeah, I think they did. You know, and Greg McElroy talked about it on the revealing show last night, and he said he thinks they course corrected a bit for BYU. And Reese Davis disagreed, said no, they moved up because Georgia and Miami lost. But I disagree with Reese. I agree with Greg because BYU and Indiana jumped Tennessee. They left Tennessee State at 7. And Indiana and BYU went ahead of Tennessee. So I do think they course corrected on BYU, giving BYU the chance that if they do lose the Big 12 championship game, that they're halfway insecure enough where they would still be in the playoffs. And the Big 12 winner, could it be Colorado, which would be unbelievable, would get the automatic bid. I think BYU would still stay in the playoffs. I think the ACC is getting one. I think they're getting one. They're getting SMU, Miami, or Clemson, however it works out in the championship game. But I do think BYU got course corrected a little bit to move up to 6. And I get what you're saying about Notre Dame and the independents, but there's such a minority in the conferences that it's tough to make any kind of case for Notre Dame to have a bye if you're going to obviously count conference championships. So quickly, right now, the matchups, again, you mentioned the rankings, but the rankings don't set up the matchups. The actual matchups, if you were to schedule the bracket right now, would be Ohio State 5 against Boise State 12, Penn State 6 against 11 Ole Miss, 7 Indiana against Alabama. Alabama would be going to Indiana to play.
Yeah.
And then Notre Dame would go to Tennessee. Tennessee is at 8 and Notre Dame would be at 9. So again, the actual rankings are different than the seedings that you would see in the actual bracket.
Yeah, no, and that was a little bit easier to stomach now this time around, and seeing all that. And yeah, it does start to get fun to play out some of these hypotheticals, teams from the South having to go up to places like Indiana where there'd be snow on the ground and it would be frigid going into that, and how everyone would respond to that. It's a different element and wrinkle to it that does make this fun. And it's part of the reason, Dad, I said again, I can hold two thoughts in my head where I don't value conference championships as highly as other people. This arbitrary distinction to me is nothing more than another game against a quality opponent, but now we've given it further weight. But on the other side, I love that it does give the group of 5 an opportunity. I love that a team like Boise State can potentially be rewarded for this season, because we see it's just hard to get the same sort of love. The committee really has been high on strength of schedule this year. It's why a team like SMU, despite I think having more impressive wins than Miami, sits behind them, because overall their schedule strength is so much lower comparatively. Army is still undefeated and sitting all the way down at 24, just ahead of Tulane, who's also in the American, because Army's got the 133rd strength of schedule in college football. And as much as I think they should be rewarded, the committee has made it clear who you play tends to matter. And so I do think that's going to continue to make it an uphill battle for the group of 5 if there's not some sort of give along the way. And I like their involvement. I think it's good for the sport, because look at what's happened this year. Like, forget just making the group of 5 case based on who's there now, Dad, with Boise State and Army and Tulane. Look at what SMU has done year one in their transition to the ACC. This was a team that was a group of 5 team a year ago and is now undefeated in that conference, in one of the Power 4 conferences, and has a real shot to make this thing. Like, the quality and the difference when you look at the bottom of FBS to the top, or excuse me, the bottom of the group of, or the bottom of the Power 4 to the top of the group of 5 is not that wide of a gap.
Listen, I agree. I want the group of 5 included. I was just throwing out a scenario that probably the SEC or Big Ten would like, and to have, so they could get another team in to have the group of 5 out. And you wonder down the road if there's ever going to be the separation of power and group. We'll have to wait and see, but I'm with you. I like the group of 5, and I do think it will take care of itself. I do think Boise State will end up being in the top 12. So Greg Sankey or Tony Petitti, you know, the SEC and Big Ten commissioners won't freak out when one of their teams gets bumped out if they're sitting at 12 and Boise State's outside of number 12. Because what a horrible thing to say, top 12 makes the playoffs, except when the group of 5 is outside the top 12. Then all of a sudden that 12th spot is a trap door.
And again, we'll talk to Mark Schlabach about this a little bit later, but the SEC is going to be the talk of the town this week because of the doomsday scenario that got presented, where Georgia beats Tennessee, who right now, Nico Iamaleava in concussion protocol, so we'll see what happens there. And then if Arkansas beats Texas or Auburn beats Texas A&M, and then Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU, and Missouri all win out because they don't play one another, there'd be a tiebreaker amongst these 8 two-loss SEC teams, where it would go down to the strength of schedule in the conference, and Alabama would have the toughest, followed by LSU at number 2. Texas, mighty Texas, whose best win is against Vanderbilt at this point and is just eye-testing their way to the top, would have the 8th toughest strength of schedule in the SEC and be left out of that. And so it would be fascinating to watch what happens amongst the rest of these groups if that's the case. And it's something we could talk to Mark about, as well as the status of that game. Coming up next, let's take a look at the NBA, because I have to confess something to you guys after watching what we watched last night. Next on GoJo and Golic. confession to make, guys. I love the NBA Cup courts. I love them. I loved the original version last year. I love the new versions of the courts we got this year. I don't love what I saw from Joel Embiid last night on the NBA Cup court as we got him back in action against the New York Knicks. We can get to that in a second because there was a lot going on. Dad's got some crow to eat relative to the Klay Thompson Boo Birds that he predicted that did not manifest themselves in Golden State. But before we get to any of that stuff in the NBA, our friend Jessie Cofield was not with us yesterday because she is getting ready to go out of the country and had the shocking, horrifying realization that I know my mom and sister had years ago that we had to rectify of realizing at the umpteenth hour that your passport is not up to date. So, Jessie, first off, what was the sheer panic of that moment like as you had to go and try and do this in a day's time before getting out of here?
So it's Monday night, and I'm starting to get things together for this trip. I'm leaving tonight, so leaving Wednesday night, and my husband's like, hey, make sure you have your passport, you know, and so I grab my passport, and I'm looking at it, and I'm realizing that it's expired, and crying, screaming, throwing up, the horror that overcame my body. And my parents are in town because they're going to watch our kids, and the way I reverted back to being a 5-year-old was immediate. I ran upstairs and I was like, Dad, what do I do? Because my passport, what do I do, Dad? And he's like, okay, here's the plan. And so we got a whole plan together. Turns out you can get your passport on an emergency basis if you have international travel within 48 hours. But yeah, I went to CVS at 7 a.m. to get the passport photo that you see right there where I look like How to Catch a Predator.
You look like you murdered somebody. That looks like a mug shot.
I felt like I had been murdered, so you can see the stress and anxiety on my face. But also, you guys, you're not allowed to smile. You're not allowed to. There's an actual mug shot, and then which one looks more like a mug shot? Probably mine.
Yeah, they both do.
I was going to say, mine's at least in like color, and surprisingly, St. Joseph's County in Indiana had decent lighting in that picture. You got the black and white treatment that makes you look like you're on a paper sign outside of a saloon in the Old West, wanted in 20 states for robbing trains.
Yeah, you know, it's the new passports. They're black and white, and you're not allowed to smile. Your mouth has to be closed. So I got up there and was kind of like, and she's like, gotta shut your mouth, no smiles. So then you're just mean mugging at the camera. And it was a long day yesterday, but got it done, and I will still be going on my trip. So I just want to thank you to my husband for saying, hey, make sure you have your passport, because if he hadn't have said that, I would have been at the airport tonight handing over my passport and being told that it's expired and I'm not going on my trip. So thank you.
Oh my God, that would have been awful. Holy smokes.
Yeah. Yep. Terrible.
There are a few darker feelings on planet Earth than showing up to the airport and realizing you're missing one of the vital elements of travel. It induces a panic unlike any other. So I'm glad you avoided that. I'm glad you avoided the jail time that your picture deserves. And we can all move on now, and you can just enjoy the internet perverts that are still going to show up for all of that. Yep. In the meantime, though, Jessie, let's talk about the NBA Cup. I am in love. Are you guys as big a fan of the courts as I am? I sat there. The NBA put out a little rip of all of the different courts that you obviously see from the visual during the game. They're beautiful, and I just love that they're doing something weird. I think it's the color rush fan in me from the NFL that looks and loves something a little bit different like this.
Our brains are wired to just love this. It's like we're drunk on color.
Well, I think they want to make it different, but I also think that fans and some players forget that it's a cup game, and then they see the floor and go, "Oh, okay, we're in group play. This game has a little more meaning to it." But I do like them too. I think they're pretty cool.
Well, and a little more meaning for the Sixers last night, Jessie. Joel Embiid comes back for them, gets to face off against Karl Anthony Towns, and I guess we should have expected this given how much time Joel's been off, but he looked really rusty.
Yeah, he did not look good. He played 26 minutes in the loss. He scored 13 points. He had 5 assists, 3 rebounds. He made only 2 of his 11 shot attempts. So, you guys worried, or is this just he's got to shake off some of this rust?
I'm not really worried. I mean, I think he's got to shake off rust. I mean, there's missing shots, but there was playing some rough defense. I mean, not blocking out, not getting in the way of a driving player on another team. I mean, there was a lot of rust to kick off, and then after the game, him talking about he may play back-to-backs. I mean, it's getting a bit confusing. I don't real worry about him getting. I mean, Paul George scored 29. Paul George is catching up after missing early on as well. They again don't have Tyrese Maxey, who's out for a couple of weeks with the hammy. So I think he'll be fine at some point, but not a great start.
No, I mean, he looked like a guy who had been a big guy dealing with a lower body injury. Like, you look, the knee brace he had on looked like the ones that I used to wear. It was so big and bulky. It looked uncomfortable. Moving looked uncomfortable for him out there. But your point about Paul George is a good one, lest we not forget when Paul came back from just dealing with that hyperextension during preseason camp, he looked a little bit off and out of sorts with the new team here. And now Joel is dealing and breaking in a new star on his team without the benefit of having Tyrese Maxey out there, who's dealing with an injury of his own right now. And, oh, by the way, coming back off that, and dealing with a very reinvigorated Karl Anthony Towns in this one. As yesterday now, Cat had 21 points, 13 boards, 6 assists in this game, and has been really productive as a scorer for the Knicks. But we talked about the other day, he is allowing 91% in the restricted area as a primary defender. And so you saw the first time Joel Embiid went down on the block, every ounce of strength that Karl had to muster was thrown into that defensive effort. And because Joel is dealing with a base that's compromised right now, you saw him actually able to be effective. And so he definitely heard people talking and showed up in a big way for this one early on. And that was going to be Joel's best bet because, as they talked about after the game, obviously conditioning's not going to be there right now. And so this 76ers team is, you're just going to kind of have to look away for a little while and let them work in the dark until we get to December, January basketball. And if they haven't rounded into form by then, when we're staring at the trade deadline, then you can sound the sirens. But first game back, we should have expected this, and it was exactly as bad as we got.
Yeah. I mean, again, no Maxey yet either. Those three have to play together for about a month just to try and get their feet under them. So am I a little worried? Because I picked them to be up near the top of the Eastern Conference. Am I a little worried? Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'm a little worried. All three of the stars are dealing with early injuries. I mean, all three have already missed time. But again, it's better to miss time early than miss time late. So it's a patience thing.
It is, but to your point, looking at the Eastern Conference standings and seeing the 76ers at 2-8, the Milwaukee Bucks at 3-8, and the struggles that they've had out the gate. Again, Milwaukee's a lot more inexplicable. Like, I truly don't know what you're going to do there, because I heard Bomani Jones bring this up the other day. You fired Adrian Griffin for what feels like less last year than how abject of a disaster this has been so far this season. And so I don't know where you go from here now with them. The 76ers do at least have the built-in excuse of, hey, none of our guys have been on the court together at the same time. But you look up now, like you mentioned, the Cavs at number 1 in the Eastern Conference, the Celtics, and then the Orlando Magic at 3rd, followed by the Knicks, Pacers, and Nets in the top 6. And so it's a new day in the Eastern Conference as some of these teams with the stars that we're used to go through all of these struggles. But, Dad, speaking of stars that we're used to, let's talk about your bold proclamation. I don't know if since the no way on God's green earth that Patrick Mahomes is going to come in, oust Alex Smith, and go on to the success that he did, have you had a take that was as wrong as thinking that Klay Thompson was going to get booed going back to Golden State to play for the first time as the Dallas Mavericks go and play an absolute heater against the Golden State Warriors for their NBA Cup game? The Warriors get the dub in this one, 120-117, behind a spectacular fourth quarter from Steph Curry. He went for 37, 9, and 6, including 5 threes made in that game and a flurry in the last 3 minutes of it. But, Dad, you thought some boo birds, maybe a smattering, would be in there for Klay Thompson coming back home. And between the captain's hats on the staff at the arena to greet Klay Thompson coming in, the tribute video, the massive standing ovation, all of the, we heard the stories behind the scenes about Steph and Klay agreeing that Steph wasn't going to make a speech because they didn't all want to cry. Draymond watching the video beforehand so that he wouldn't get caught up in the emotion of it here. This may have been the most love I have ever seen for a returning player going back to their old arena in my entire life.
I don't know. I think there was a smattering of boos that was just overdone by the cheers. So I think there might have been 1 or 2 people booing. No, there wasn't. I mean, you're right. This was This was one of the greatest return receptions I have ever seen. I mean, and boy, did the game live up. And the players lived up. Clay had 22. I mean, 6 of 12 from 3-point. He was daggering them, but Steph had 37. Clay actually shot better at the three-point line. Steph was 5 of 12. But Steph, did it at the end and did the old night thing, laying his hands in his head. It was a heck of a game. But yeah, the reception was fantastic. Good for Clay. I mean, I'm happy to see it.
Yeah, assessing the damage on last year's Klay Thompson season is sort of interesting, and I've seen a lot of people point out you can really whittle it down to a bad stretch more so than a bad overall year for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I do think the quiet part of how raucous this reception was the fact that Klay Thompson did not leave at the height of his powers, right? Like, if you get a player that leaves their team at the height of their powers when the fans and the home crowd think, oh, we still could have gotten more of the benefit of that player, I do think you open up the likelihood for boos a lot more than a team where everyone involved from the fan base and the reception of this team seemed like they were kind of ready for or preparing for the end of that iteration of the Golden State Warriors. So, again, while I understand everything he gave, 4 championships, and the way Klay did it, Klay is one of the most personable guys. He's such a unique personality. The boat thing, I mean, for anyone that was unfamiliar, is a nod to the fact that the guy used to boat to the home games at the arena during his time there. And so he was always a guy that played really well with everyone else in the media. You could see why he's likable. But I also do think we need to acknowledge that part of it, that if he had been balling last year and then had decided to go somewhere else, this probably doesn't have the same love feeling welcome home.
Yeah, listen, he's averaging 14.5 points a game. The only year he averaged lower than that in his entire career was his rookie year, when he averaged 12.5 points a game. So, yeah, he is not leaving at the height of his powers, and it was a great reception. And by the way, it was a hell of a game. So there is that. It was a heck of a game in a Western Conference that has many teams. You talk about the Eastern Conference, there's 2 teams above 500. In the Western Conference, there is 7 that are above 500. So, and Dallas isn't one of them. Dallas is sitting at 5-6. But Golden State, I'm not going to lie, still a surprise to me. I don't know how many people saw it coming. They're sitting at 9-2 and looking really, really good. I didn't see that. We thought this was a breakup of the big 3, which it was, with Klay being gone, although not at the height of his powers, as we talked about. But still, the way they're playing is fantastic right now.
Yeah, we talked about this the other week. They'd been one of the surprises of the early season. Buddy Hield is now the new backcourt mate for Steph Curry, and what he's done. I mean, really, you couldn't find a better home for Buddy Hield's style of play than coming out to Golden State and the brand of basketball Steve Kerr and this bunch want to play. But you're right, 3 teams tied at 9-2 atop the standings, and them Oklahoma City and the Phoenix Suns too in the mix for all of this, which I think is fascinating. Now, we know Kevin Durant dealing with the injury. That's going to inform a lot of what goes on going forward, and that's always the biggest worry for that team. That's a lot older core at the center of their roster than a team like Oklahoma City, who, listen, has Chet Holmgren dealing with the hip fracture now. The Western Conference is going to be fascinating, but it does seem, much like it did last year, like far and away the superior conference right now. It's just with a mixed bag of some different names. The Dallas Mavericks team that represented in the finals is currently outside of the playoff picture right now. You've got a Lakers resurgent team that's been getting the best out of Anthony Davis so far this year. On and on down the list, that side seems like it's going to be an absolute juggernaut.
Yeah, the team that interests me the most, as long as, they stay healthy, and already you're nicked up a little bit, is Memphis with Ja Morant. If he can put basically a full season together, they're sitting at 7-4 right now, tied with Houston. So that's a team I'm definitely keeping an eye on in the West. Not the ones we normally talk about.
Yep, so the early season NBA action and the NBA Cup providing the fireworks that Adam Silver always hoped for when he birthed this into existence. Coming up next, though, speaking of excitement, how about changing teams in the NFL not once but twice in a season and then coming in for the game winner in Game 1? We'll talk to Mike Williams, Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver, next. right, excited to talk to our next guest now, Steelers wide receiver Mike Williams, which I'd imagine you're still getting used to that title, Mike, considering you spent your whole career so far in the lead up with the Los Angeles Chargers. You go and obviously begin this season with the Jets, and then come over and ho-hum, make the game-winning catch in your first appearance for the Pittsburgh Steelers as you're probably still finding your way around the building, man. So good morning and congratulations on the success. How you feeling?
Good morning. How y'all doing? Thank you. I'm feeling good. Obviously, come over here, continue to, win, get the dub Sunday against, a very good team and the Commanders. It was dope.
Yeah, I would imagine it had to feel incredible. Let's go back though. I mean, you spent, as my son said, first 7 years with the Chargers. Then you go to the Jets and then to Pittsburgh. How difficult, I don't know if that's the right word, was it to leave a place you had been with for 7 years?
Well, it was different for sure. I built a lot of relationships in that building with the Chargers from, being a rookie to, being a vet and one of the older guys in the locker room. So, just being a familiar face in that building every day, seeing a lot of people come, a lot of people go, you kind of realize that it's a business. And, obviously I tore my ACL last year, so it was pretty clear that they probably was going to let me go because of that. And, I was just looking forward for the next opportunity. Took a visit to the Jets, went there, and obviously, things didn't work out there. Now I'm here and, having a good time.
So speaking of that transition, going over in the middle of a season and getting ready to play in a game the following week, what are those first couple of days like in Pittsburgh when you got there, getting acclimated enough to be ready and be available to make a play like that?
Everything happened so fast. I got the call in 2 hours. I was on a plane out here trying to figure out, what time I'm due the physical, get ready for practice, all those things. But for me, it was football at the end of the day. I just want to be able to play football. I was playing this game since a kid. And, just to have, guys around in this locker room, to help with the transition, it was pretty good.
And as far as a transition, the one thing we talk about in going from team to team is, while nobody's reinventing the wheel on offense or defense, the calls are different. The language is different. They say it's like learning a different language. What was the package for you going into the game? Was it more spoon-fed and not force-fed because of the possible language barrier of the offense?
Well, for me, it helped a little bit because Coach Z came from the Jets, so the formations and some language was still the same in that aspect. So that kind of helped a lot for me, actually, just to get lined up and kind of read plays in that aspect of things. But yeah, just my prep, just studying, getting extra meeting time, throwing with the quarterbacks in between periods, just to kind of, see where they like things and that aspect of the game. But yeah, for me, it was just kind of just knowing where to go when you hit a formation, don't look lost, and just playing fast.
You mentioned spending extra time with the quarterbacks. Russell Wilson, we know, took over a few weeks ago for the Steelers team. The passing offense has really developed there, but he's a guy you've seen around the league as a longtime veteran. What was his message to you when you got there?
Just be me. That was the main thing. Just be me. The big play guy that I always been in this league. Just take advantage of my opportunities. That was the main thing. He was thankful to have me, and I was just excited just to come over here. For me, it was already winning before I got here. So just me coming over here, just asking myself, how can I help take it to the next level, and be part of the, solution, not part of the problem. So for me, it was just coming over here, just a winning team and continue this thing.
Even though you hadn't played with Russell Wilson before, he is known for the deeper ball and the height of it and how it drops in. So kind of take us through that play, that winning touchdown.
Oh, it was a go ball on the outside. Early on in the game, I saw him throw a couple deep balls, and I was just tracking the ball on the sideline, just seeing the launch point and where it landed and how he was throwing it. So for me, when I got the opportunity, I knew that when I ran the route, I had to, check the sky and don't look for him because you can lose sight of the ball. So when I got out there, I ran the route and I already knew where the ball was going to be placed. So I just checked the sky for the ball and it was there and I made a play.
Made a big play, no doubt. I saw the reception you got on the sideline from Mike Tomlin, who walked over and said, "You're a Steeler now," after making that big play and showing up in the fourth quarter. The go-ahead play. So many of us see Mike Tomlin, the press conference from the outside. You've certainly seen him being a part of this league. Getting to be inside the locker room right now, what's already stood out to you about Mike Tomlin as the leader of this team?
Oh, I love it. I love how he go by his day-to-day. His team meetings are – he bring the energy. He call people out, let people know what's wrong, what's right. You know what I'm saying? And he's a leader, so that's the main thing. I feel like every team needs that leader in the head coach, and he's that we have. So we listen to him, we fight with him, and we want to win for him.
You signed with the Jets, and what was it like going from a Jets team with high expectations going into the season? I mean, they were sky high. And then leaving that team and going to a team that's leading the division. What do you think went wrong with the Jets?
I don't know. I still kind of ask myself that to this day. I really don't know. I can't put like a answer to it. I don't really know. It just didn't work out, to be honest with you. I thought going into it was going to be a great situation for what I was looking for at the time, and it ended up not being what I thought it would be. And I'm just thankful for this opportunity to come out here and play out here now. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Even from your personal standpoint, I guess, are you surprised the team-wise that the Jets, with what was kind of put together there, that it's not working?
I mean, everything kind of happens for a reason. Like I told you, I don't have the answers. I don't have all the answers for it. So for me, my main focus is just over here for right now. That's in the past. I guess they'll figure out what they got going on over there as soon as possible. But my main focus is over here.
Well, we won't ask you to look back too much longer here. I did see the Instagram post with the hashtag Redline. Was that a reference to the Aaron Rodgers comments?
Nah, that wasn't at all. I mean, I
really?
feel like I made a name on the red line. That's what I'm good at, playing on the red line. I feel like that's how people know me. That's what my game is made of. So, yeah. I mean, you could check the tape, check whatever. You could see a lot of catches on the red line. So, yeah, that was just a caption that was needed at the time. That's where the ball was caught at, and we won. So, yeah.
All right, there we go. Nothing to read into here for everyone on the outside trying to make something about this over on Instagram. So now, I guess now you go through this, you get the touchdown catch, and you've found a way to go and be productive. Like you said, how can you be a part of winning here? Now, as you start to settle in here, what's your goal for the rest of your time, hopefully with this season, as a Steeler, now that you have some time to actually get to know the place?
My goal is just, help the team win ball games. That's my main goal. Wherever I fit in, make my plays, and handle my responsibilities. So that's the main thing that I'm looking to this week. If there's more opportunities, I'm thankful for it, and just come out here and have a great week of prep, and just be me. That's the main thing. Just be Mike Williams that got me to this point, and continue to smile and have fun playing this game.
No doubt you are, like you said, such a proven track record as a big play receiver in this league. And that's why I wanted to ask you quick before we let you go. And we appreciate all your time today. This has been a ton of fun. But you walked into a wide receiver room that also has another big play guy there in George Pickens, who's been a part of this team, was one of their draft picks here. And for you as a guy that's a veteran that's been around this league, what are your early impressions of George and what he's done so well in this wide receiver room for Pittsburgh?
For me, just watching from the outside in and just being here, He crazy at tracking the ball also. A big play threat. He's smooth for a big guy in and out his routes also. He can sink his hips, get in and out his routes, so that was good to see. But, yeah, I mean, George is just George. He's a freak athlete, crazy athletic, and just, make plays in any part of the field for this offense. So, yeah, I'm thankful just to, have him in the room, and looking forward to, building off each other and making each other better every day.
No doubt, as you guys lead the division right now, and certainly that passing game with Russell Wilson at the helm continues to develop. Going to be a huge part of that there. We have to ask you the rite of passage on the way out. You mentioned Mike Tomlin, the leader. We already talked to you about him some. Have you picked up a favorite Tomlinism yet? All of the meeting sayings that he has that we know are such a big part of him. Have you figured out your favorite yet, or are you still sampling a lot of them?
I don't know. I feel like the first week I was here, I just heard 5-star football. So I was hearing that. I was hearing that a lot last week. Was let's play 5-star football. So right now, that's the only one that really stuck out to me is him saying we gonna play 5-star football this past Sunday.
There we go. Well, you did exactly that, came through when the Steelers needed you the most, and I'm sure there's more of that to come in the future. Mike, we appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much. Best of luck the rest of the season, all right? So Mike Williams has been a good story for them in recent weeks here, and Steelers with wide receivers on the move is an interesting subplot going into this weekend. So Pittsburgh hosts the Baltimore Ravens this weekend, who now are home to Deontay Johnson, former wide receiver in Pittsburgh, who was part of that group when things were leaking out of the locker room. People appeared disgruntled between him and George Pickens. There was a lot of scuttlebutt there. And so Mike Tomlin got asked about that factor, Deontay Johnson making his return to Pittsburgh, and did not mince words in how he assessed the situation. Take a listen to this.
To be honest with you, I hadn't thought a lot about it. He's not on a lot of their video, and so, at this stage of the week, I don't know that I've weighed, what he might mean to the matchup. They got more significant pieces with larger roles that are occupying my attention at this part of the week.
They got more significant pieces in larger roles that are occupying my attention. That is as close as Mike Tomlin's going to get to cutting a full-blown diss track at the microphone there, Dad. And quite honestly, he's right. Like, Mike Tomlin already is kind of having a banner here in terms of being able to put his nose up at the rest of us for doubting his judgment with the Russell Wilson switch. But I've seen plenty of Steelers fans taking the victory lap on Deontay Johnson. Did you see last week in the Ravens 2-minute drill, Deontay Johnson makes a catch, no sense of urgency in getting up and trying to get the ball handed to the official so they can spike it and get one more play before the half? Like, it was a jarring lack of effort that, to me, if I was a new teammate, I'd be pissed about. And this is, I think, a lot of the stuff that Steelers fans and some of the people around the South Side there were talking about when they were not as, I'd say, upset to see him go as some might have thought.
Yeah, I mean, just watch the way you play the game. I mean, and that is so telling, because that is such an important part of the game, because you work on it all the time. 2-minute drill is worked on every single week, sometimes twice a week. And it's all about the speed of getting the ball snapped. And to be in that position and not do it just blows my mind. Even with a rookie, because it's worked on in college as well. It's worked on everywhere. And to not have the wherewithal to understand, to get the ball back to the line of scrimmage is ridiculous. And you're right. I don't think too many people were upset to see him go.
Yeah, I mean, wherewithal or just the effort. Like you heard Mike Williams talking about, coming into a new team, you're trying to do everything you can to go and earn the trust of the people that are already there. And Mike Williams is doing that with Russell Wilson, who's a veteran and a Super Bowl champion and probably a Hall of Famer still at this point. Deontay Johnson's on a team with the guy that's the reigning MVP and one of the best players, if not currently the best player in the NFL, at least the way he's playing this season. And to not go and be motivated by having a chance to be part of that, again, I don't want to totally judge the guy based off one play, but unfortunately the body of work is getting hard to ignore there. And with a new team and a new lease on life, I was just a little surprised that popped up as early as it did. So Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, not all that worried about that, Dad. What I am most thankful for, though, is that we're probably going to get more Mike Tomlin quotes as the in-season Hard Knocks is going to start. And they're doing the whole AFC North, which means we're probably going to get NFL mic'd up footage of Mike Tomlin, and we're all winners for that.
Yeah, listen, I was out on Hard Knocks for a while, but and I wasn't going to watch the offseason one with the Giants, and that turned out to be pretty good. So I'm kind of back in again, just not knowing what characters you're going to get or situations you're going to get. So I'm kind of they've reeled me back in again.
You can never count my dad out with a TV show because this man consumes more television than anyone ever created. And because he goes through all of it so fast, he's constantly fiending for the next hit. And Hard Knocks and all its new iterations has finally lured him back over. Coming up next, we'll head back over to the world of college football. Mark Schlabach going to stop by and try and help us assess the damage from the second round of playoff rankings next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Let's get you up to speed in the world of college basketball. So for starters, the Kansas Jayhawks took on the Michigan State Spartans in an early matchup for the State Farm Champions Classic. Now the Jayhawks won 77-69, giving Bill Self a huge milestone. He became the all-time winningest coach at Kansas with 591, passing Fog Allen at 590. In the second game of the State Farm Champions Classic, it featured a top 20 matchup as new-look number 19 Kentucky took on number 6 Duke and Cooper Flagg. After a good back and forth there, the Wildcats took home the victory after back-to-back turnovers from Flagg. He finished with 26 points as Mark Pope and the Wildcats get their first big win of the season. Coming up next, Mark Schlabach stops by to educate us on the CFP.
All right, hour number 2 here of GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. Coming up in about a half hour, COURTNey Cronin, ESPN Bears reporter, is going to stop by, talk about the fallout of what happened yesterday. Shane Waldron fired as the offensive coordinator, and where they go from here with the rest of that coaching staff and what they should be prioritizing going forward, I think becomes fascinating. She's written some great stuff about the candidates they passed up for that job under Matt Eberflus that now may have even bigger ambitions with that organization soon. So we'll get to that coming up, but we did have the college football playoff second round of rankings last night. And so for more on helping us break that down, Mark Schlabach, kind enough to join us, ESPN college football reporter. Mark, good morning. Happy college football rankings reaction eve day now here. What did you take away from the second round of rankings last night as we've now got 2 looks at what this committee values?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Miami got dinged pretty hard for its first loss of the season at Georgia Tech. Georgia got dinged really hard for its second loss at Ole Miss, dropping 9 spots to number 12. I think we all expected Oregon and Ohio State to remain first and second. BYU jumping Miami for that third spot in the among the 4 conference champions was a little bit of a surprise, but we'll just have to see how it all shakes out. There's still a lot of football to be played, as Ward Manuel said.
What are a couple of wild card teams that you see maybe right outside the top 12 that could pose a threat?
SMU might, the way they've played, got an early loss to BYU, but unbeaten, I think, in ACC play. I think them and Miami are probably on a collision course to play in that ACC championship game. I think they're sitting there at 14 right now, so would only have to move up a couple of spots. I still am very intrigued to see how the committee handles trying to distribute these at-large bids evenly to where it's not a Big Ten SEC invitational. I think in the back of their minds, that's something they're going to want to do in year one to appease people. But, I think SMU would be the only other ACC team that would have a spot. I think Boise State, the schedule strength is what it is. They had that early close loss at Oregon. Can they keep winning, and can teams in the ACC and the Big 12 keep losing to where maybe BYU gets in the top 4 and gets a first-round bye where a Kansas State or a Colorado or a Miami or SMU's having to play in the first round?
You mentioned a couple of the teams that, SMU having the path through the ACC championship where they control their own destiny. Colorado in the same boat right now. Boise State in the group of 5 always, I think, knowing that was probably going to be the path for them. We asked the question earlier, in general, are you in favor of the conference winners getting the automatic bid into the tournament? Before in the 4-team playoff, it had been just one data point, and now it's an automatic qualifier for the dance. Do you like this for college football?
No. I think it's horrible. I think it's clear if you follow the sport at all that the 2 leagues are head and shoulders above everyone else. I mean, there are 4 Big Ten teams in the top 5. There are 9 SEC teams in the top 25. Those teams, especially in the SEC, are cannibalizing each other right now. Their schedule strengths are much higher than those other leagues. I just think it's going to be a shame that if, let's say, Oregon loses to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, and they've been number 1 all year, and beat Ohio State during the regular season, that they would get bumped to number 5 and have to play a first-round game. And Miami with 2 losses, hypothetically, or Colorado with 2 losses or 3 losses even, would be sitting at home resting in the first round of the playoffs.
I guess I would ask then, what's the value of a conference championship?
Bragging rights is about it. I mean, they're not going to go away, Mike, because they make so much damn money for the conferences. They're money machines. And, if you ask a guy like Kirby Smart, they'll tell you that winning the SEC still matters and matters a lot to him. But I just think in this new age of this expanded playoff, they mean less. And in some cases, I think there are some guys that maybe say don't play in the SEC championship game or the Big Ten championship game, sit home that week and rest, and then go play on an 11 seed or a 12 seed and maybe get the 3rd or 4th seed in the second round. And it's an easier path than winning your league.
Would you be in favor of taking the human element out of the committee and going back to the computer rankings outside of they're not going to get rid of the conference championship, you're right. But if they did, go back to the computer rankings, which just spits out data?
Yeah, I mean, we hated the BCS computers, if you remember, which is why they went to the selection committee. I just there's still too much, personal opinion and subjectivity in it. But they're all humans. I think they're going to get criticized here for the next few weeks for some of their decisions, and hopefully in the end, once everybody's played everybody and the conference championships have been played, it will all shake out in a good way.
Yeah, we've got a lot of that will get sorted out. College football does tend to do a remarkable job of taking care of itself with the results on the field here. The Indiana Hoosiers moving up to 5 at this one and jumping Tennessee, who's been sitting there, was ahead of them in the last round of rankings. Did that surprise you at all?
It does, because I think their schedule strength is 81st at this point. And again, I love Curt Cignetti. I love what he's done in Bloomington in his first year. He took advantage of the way college football operates right now. He grabbed a bunch of his kids from James Madison, where he did a tremendous job. They're believing Curtis Rourke played really well. They won even without him for a week. But you look at the schedule: Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State, Michigan. I think they beat UCLA and Maryland early. I think they played 7 of their first 10 games at home. Get Ohio State in 2 weeks, and it's basically make or break it. I think if they don't beat Ohio State, I think they're going to have a tough time getting in because of schedule strength. If they win, regardless of the schedule, I think they're definitely a playoff team.
I was just going to ask that. I feel like the Big Ten put themselves in, or the committee put the Big Ten in the position to get 4 in. Even if Indiana loses a close game to Ohio State and it's their only loss and they're sitting at 5. I know they dropped Georgia and Miami a long way, but if it's a close win and Penn State wins out, and then obviously the winner of Oregon and OSU both are going to be in, I almost think like they're almost guaranteed 4.
I mean, they got 4 of the top 5 right now, so certainly they're putting a lot of weight on the Big Ten. But again, if you lose to Ohio State, what's their best win of the season? Nebraska 56-7. Washington 31-17. Michigan's really struggling. They won 20-15 in Bloomington last week. I give them credit because other than the Michigan game, they've blown out everybody they've played and run away with it. But schedule strength has to matter, in my opinion. I mean, you look at Alabama's schedule, you look at Georgia's schedule. Look, Georgia hasn't played well, but it's difficult to play well when you're playing at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. Nobody else has played that slate. And you look at the strength of record metrics that ESPN has, I think Georgia is number 2 or 3 right now, just based on schedule strength. LSU's played a brutal schedule. It's not going to be apples to apples, and going away from divisions has made it even more difficult to decipher who's who, because everybody's not playing everybody. And since everybody's gone to 16, 17, 18-team leagues, that they're not going to play everybody. So, again, committee's going to have a lot of power in this.
You mentioned the strength of schedule, absolutely been a huge factor in how the committee's legislated a lot of this. Georgia, number 1 in strength of schedule, number 3 in strength of resume, as you pointed out there, which makes it really interesting. We've all seen now it kicked around this, theory of the doomsday scenario in the SEC, where you've got 8 2-loss teams in conference. LSU would end up playing with 3 losses on the season in the conference championship and potentially having a road to go. But to me, it underscores a bigger point. Texas is the highest ranked SEC team right now at number 3. They are 56th in strength of schedule. Their best win is against Vanderbilt right now. And they're a team that people look at and wonder, are they actually the best team? So I'd ask, in your mind, who is the best team in the SEC right now, actually?
This week, maybe Ole Miss. It seems to bounce from week to week. I mean, everybody thought Bama was the best team coming out of the Georgia win, even though they squandered a 28-point lead in the second half and had to hit that big pass to Ryan Williams at the end. And then they lose to Vanderbilt, lose to Tennessee. Georgia looked like the best team after they won 30-15 at Texas and really manhandled the Longhorns. And then they look bad against Florida, look bad against Mississippi State, lose badly at Ole Miss. Ole Miss, hadn't really won any big games under Lane Kiffin until last week. So, Texas, I think they've all got flaws, Mike. I think some have been exposed by some teams, but not all. I still think Texas has got some concerns at quarterback with Quinn Ewers. He played better last week, but he looked a little gun shy after that Georgia game. I don't know that they're as strong on both lines of scrimmage as some of the other teams. Bama, they're pretty much as Milroe goes. If Jalen Milroe's playing well, if he's running the ball, they're going to be difficult to stop. Georgia, I think right now, Carson Beck's a mystery. They've had some injuries on the offensive line and have not played well. Defensively, they're missing more tackles than they've missed in the past under Kirby Smart. But, if they beat Tennessee at home Saturday night, I think they've won 7 out of 8. I don't think Kirby's teams have lost back-to-back games since 2016. Georgia's right back in the mix.
Speaking of Georgia, they got the big one against Tennessee this weekend that you just mentioned there, and I know you were part of the reporting around the current status of Nico Iamaleava, the quarterback for Tennessee that's in the concussion protocol coming off of last week. What's the latest you've heard on that as far as expectations of if he'll play or not?
Yeah, Pete Thamel and a couple others reported last night that he's in concussion protocol, but I guess he's practiced on Tuesday and Wednesday, I assume, non-contact. We'll get the SEC availability report tonight around 8:00, and then another report on Thursday, and I guess another one Saturday about 15 minutes before kickoff. I'd be surprised if he doesn't play. Like I said, Georgia, Kirby's really flipped that rivalry. They've taken care of business against Tennessee for the most part, but I think Tennessee definitely has to have him if they're going to have a chance. I'm surprised that's a 10-point spread the way Georgia played last week.
I am too, especially given the fact that both of these it's really going to be a war between the defenses for both of these teams, where Tennessee, Georgia, the SEC defined by defense, which has to make some people of a certain age definitely excited to see that for a league that had become a little bit of pace and space for a while there. Mark, we appreciate all the time and insight, man. Thank you. We know it's a long season with a wild close coming up here, so excited to see what happens and hopefully talk to you again soon, all right?
Senior, sorry to hear about Jerry Faust. Met him one time. What a great gentleman.
Great man. Great man. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Dad, I'd say looking ahead to this weekend, he mentioned it, though, with Tennessee and Georgia. I think this matchup's so unique in that obviously you want Nico out there, knocked out in the back half of last week, and Josh originally indicated that was more precautionary than anything, but now seeing him show up in the concussion protocol does raise some eyebrows, but there's no doubt you'd have the best chance of winning with him out there, and that really does seem like a game where it's going to be which quarterback can avoid making the mistake and actually make a couple of big plays. That's what Tennessee, I think, has struggled with on offense, not making as many deep downfield plays as in the past, and Georgia, it's just turning the football over constantly behind an offensive line that tried to get Taylor Ratledge back last week, their best player, and then saw him get a little bit banged up again. And so as they keep shuffling that group, the protection in front of Carson Beck has really struggled this season.
Well, listen, this comes down to whether Nico's going to play or not, right? The backup is Gaston Moore. He's thrown 25 passes this year. It's going to be tough to put it in his hands. If Nico stayed in the locker room the second half of the Mississippi State game, came out the post game. So we'll see. We'll see what if he can play this week. That obviously would be hugely important for Tennessee. And while it seems like Mark and I think others would like to maybe get rid of the conference championship, so one thing I do like, and I hope they keep, is the home field, right? And not going to a bowl game, but the home field. Because right now in the matchups, you would have Ole Miss going to Penn State and Alabama going to Indiana on December 20th. That could be a very decided advantage for the home teams in weather.
Yeah, in a sport where the Bulls have often dictated, I think, a little bit too much about what happens in the postseason, some in particular, cough, the Rose Bowl, I do love the idea of this give back to fans as their sport has changed so much that they could potentially watch their team play a postseason game at home.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here with you. Guys, the Cowboys have announced that Dak Prescott has undergone season-ending surgery on his hamstring. So opening up the door, obviously, for Cooper Rush to be the starter, but should he? What's your take on this, guys? How should the Cowboys be handling the QB room now with Dak out of there?
Yeah, Dad, I mean, listen, you're going to do what you can to try and put the team in the best position to win right now, first and foremost. Like, Micah Parsons kind of underscored this. There's still a bunch of other guys in this locker room that matter a lot to the team who want to go out there and try and save some bit of face in the course of this season. But eventually, if Cooper Rush goes out and struggles the way they did this last week, you're going to try and get a look at Trey Lance, maybe if for nothing else to see if he can play well enough to become an asset that you move, or your full-time backup going forward in a guy who could offer you some things behind Dak Prescott. But this is one of those things where it's not as sexy or fun for Jerry Jones to try and sell us on a quarterback controversy like he did the last time Cooper Rush took over, because Dak Prescott's got the money now. He's going to be there. He's going to be your starting quarterback. So the rest of this is really a moot point in shuffling deck chairs in the Titanic.
Yeah, at some point you have to find out what Trey Lance is going to bring, and this is the chance to do it, whether it's this week, next week, the week after. But exactly right, to find out if he's an asset to move, because why keep him around, if you're not sure. So see what he can do, give him a chance. And then does he stay and become the backup? Does he beat out Cooper Rush, who has been there for more than a few years? Or does he become an asset to move? I mean, I think you need to find out one way or the other, and this is the time to find out. We always talk about making a decision for the rest of the team, but that's when you're in the running, when you're in the hunt for the playoffs. If you're not, then even guys in the locker room understand you're going to start testing things that you have to for the future, because the present is kind of over for the regular season. So you have to start looking beyond the present. And that would be putting Trey Lance out there. So I definitely think at some point he needs to get out there and play.
No, and you're right. Players in the locker room are smart enough to know, hey, based on the way our season's already gone, and now Dak Prescott, the guy who gives us the best chance at winning a quarterback, is down. And, hearing Jerry Jones talk about it said, this is an injury that's more common in hockey, so he's got doctors very familiar. It sounds like, thankfully, the long-term prognosis on this, and thankfully, that's what they put at the forefront, was the long-term prognosis for the guy you signed to be a quarterback beyond just this year. Sounds like it's going to be pretty good for Dak Prescott, but just the bleep icing on top of the bleep cake this year for Dallas as their season has gone into the can pretty early on. And I guess the interesting thing now, Dad, beyond, what happens at quarterback, which again, to me is sort of immaterial with this Dallas team. It's only so interesting to me because the team is so bad and because the quarterback situation there is now set for years to come, is what we do see as a response to this from Jerry Jones this offseason. Certainly, Mike McCarthy's job came into focus the other day with the Micah Parsons comments. We know he was walking into a lame duck year. But Jerry Jones, who said he was all in last year and then proceeded to do absolutely nothing besides go out at the trade deadline and bring over checks notes Jonathan Mingo from the Carolina Panthers, if this will actually prompt some soul searching from the Dallas front office in how they go about team building. There are some older guys on that roster like Zach Martin who are in the final year of their deal, and we don't know exactly what that core is going to look like going forward. But now, does it capsizing this famously all of a sudden force Jerry Jones and this front office to actually go out and act in a way that they just have not for quite some time?
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Jones talks about they do everything they can to build a winner. Well, and the hardest thing for an owner / GM to admit is when they didn't or they made a mistake. And he stands by the fact that they did everything, and that a guy like Derrick Henry was out of their price range. Laugh hysterically at that, with the running backs cap number being only second to kickers. So, and I hear analysts talking about, they should trade Micah Parsons. Like, why? Why? You signed Dak Prescott to a long-term deal. When he's healthy, he's one of the better quarterbacks. You have one of the best defensive players in the league. Build around it. I mean, you did nothing for the running game. You have CeeDee Lamb out there as the lone really wide receiver Build around it. You have a couple of young pieces on the O-line. I happen to think this is going to be Zach Martin's last year. I think he'll walk away after this year and 5 years later walk into the Hall of Fame. But they have a couple of young offensive linemen, struggling. Guyton's struggling, obviously, at left tackle, but getting the experience. So I would build off of what you have, make the cuts where you necessarily need to make the cuts, and build up this roster. And listen, he cannot admit it publicly, but looking in the mirror, they have to realize they did a horrible job in the offseason getting this team to be another one of the 12-win or 13-win teams going into the playoffs. They didn't do anything to help that at all. But obviously they have another offseason to remedy that.
They do, and I think mercifully for people that are against all of the coverage, the outsized amount of it that the Cowboys get by nature of being interesting, I think we're probably coming to the end of that, even though I haven't checked. I think them and the Jets both had an outsized number of primetime games going into this year that might still be in effect, which, God bless and keep any of us that have to see these teams in the light too much longer. But I do think with the Cowboys, Dad, to your point about building, you've got the tent poles that most organizations would kill for. A quarterback that gives you a better than average chance to win. One of the best wide receivers in the NFL in CeeDee Lamb. You're going to sign, to your point, they're going to sign Micah Parsons to the extension because it also would help them smooth out their cap situation last year. Dan Graziano on ESPN.com talked about it. Hey, you just rework a little bit of the Dak Prescott contract, a little bit of the CeeDee Lamb contract, the same way they've been doing for years, moving around some of the guaranteed money in these deals, and then you sign Micah to a long-term extension. And now all of a sudden you're in a little bit more manageable place, but getting to build around those as the tent poles, which in the modern NFL, more than ever, it's been draw a through line from the quarterback on out, from quarterback to tackle to pass rusher to the guys that catch the ball on the outside, and you find the most important positions. We've seen that value reflected in wide receiver. They've got those taken care of. And so now you've just got to find a way to build around those in a way that a competent front office should be able to do. And so Dallas's front office gets to go out and prove to us if they are capable of being competent with that now laid out. We hear people complain all the time about what you do once you've paid your quarterback. Good front offices go to work and bad front offices make excuses.
That's exactly right. Basically when all the hoopla was going around Dak and as he's going to sign, they had to know basically what the numbers are going to be. And that's exactly right. What good organizations do. They foresee what the number is going to be and where they're going to be cap wise. They should foresee Micah Parsons, what they're going to pay him. And they pay late as well, which they end up paying their talent, but they pay them late. But they have to be able to foresee what the number's going to be and how. So you're not in a position where you say you can't afford the second lowest cap hit of a position in the running back position. I mean, that's just putting yourself in an awful situation. And they did it. Though they won't admit it, they did it. And they have to do better in the offseason.
So this was interesting, and this is a point we can get to another day before we move on to another team in the NFC East with existential questions at the quarterback position that may be coming to a head sooner than later. I went and checked just for the hell of it right now in the NFL, to your point about the running back situation, at the run-pass ratio for a lot of teams. And when you look at teams that are primarily running the ball, the highest run-to-pass ratio in the NFL, they're pretty much all the good teams. The Philadelphia Eagles, number 1. The Steelers, number 2. The Ravens, number 3. Followed by the Lions, Commanders, Chargers, Cardinals, Packers, 49ers, Vikings, Bills, Dolphins. That top list of them are the best teams in the NFL right now that are taking advantage of the ground game and making things happen in that way, whether it's because of the way defenses are formatted now, some of the talent that's moved around here, mobility of quarterbacks being increased, whatever you ascribe it to, right now that seems to be the trend in the league. And so Dallas figuring out a way to both be able to run and stop the run, an easy priority for this offseason to try and go and sink their teeth into. Jesse, they're not the only ones, though, that we mentioned with quarterback questions abounding right now. The New York Giants, I saw Adam Schefter report the other day that he believes it's possible Daniel Jones has played his last snap for the Giants.
Yeah, listen to this. So Joe Shane had some comments about the future of the QB position. Here it is.
How much of a role will Daniel's contract and the injury guarantee play into how much he plays for the rest of the season?
Yeah, we're going to evaluate everything the rest of the week, and the decisions we make will be football decisions.
So that won't be involved in the analysis here.
It will be a football decision.
Well, if it's a football decision, have we seen the last of Daniel Jones?
Wink, wink.
Yeah, this feels like the Agatha all along, like wink gif one there, because Dad, we know it's never all just a football decision with these guys. The money's too tied into it, and that injury guarantee that got referenced is a $23 million injury guarantee for Daniel Jones that would be in the 2025 season. And so that's a lot to weigh, and I do wonder for the Giants, who it seems like it's very clear and has been for a while, not entirely the fault of Daniel Jones at all. We've talked about ad nauseum how much environments play a factor in quarterback performance, and Daniel Jones, with the amount of different coordinators and coaches and voices he's had in his ear, combined with the lack of protection, really until this year, the lack of true weapons in that offense, there's plenty of blame to go around, but he ain't the quarterback for them come this time next season. Right. And so it would probably behoove them to make sure they don't put that guy who does play a physical brand of football at risk of being on the hook for that kind of money come 2025.
Yep, they're not going to publicly admit that it's factoring in the injury guarantee of $23 million. And he's basically a low dead cap hit. His dead cap hit, they get rid of him, is $22 million. I mean, that's considering what some of the other ones are, that's a pretty low dead cap hit. So, I mean, listen, they were, in watching the Hard Knocks preseason or the offseason, they were thinking of going a different direction to start this year. So he's done nothing. And I agree with you, Mike. It's not all on him. It's absolutely not all on him. But that's still the linchpin of the offense, the quarterback position. And I don't think, and more importantly, I don't think they believe he's done enough to stay, to be the quarterback. So it's a low dead cap hit. And I could see them not playing him because of the injury guarantee of $23 million. So I could definitely see him being done right now as a quarterback of the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's kind of like the situation we're getting ready to talk about. Courtney Cronin's going to join us in a couple of minutes here to talk about the Bears situation and their star quarterback and who's to blame for what's gone wrong with the Chicago offense as Shane Waldron got fired and clearly was going to be the one easiest to at least have to publicly take the blame for that right now. And with the Giants, yes, there's plenty of things mixed in there. And you're right. Listen, Daniel Jones was not a guy that I was sold on as high as he was picked in the draft class that he came out in. And it's been a roller coaster ride in the interim, but I don't think we can look and feel like, yeah, the Giants necessarily put a roster around him that was capable of that. But to your point, when they paid him the contract that was essentially 2 years at about $40 million a year, it was with the idea that, hey, we made the postseason in year one with Brian Daboll off the backs of Saquon Barkley and this rushing attack and Daniel Jones playing timely football. And so we're going to reward the quarterback because we believe that's the most important position. Our offensive line, quite honestly, is not in a position to max out Saquon Barkley like we've seen the Eagles do. And we need him to take those steps at being the guy that influences more of the offense. And it never happened. And so it was a bet that the Giants made over the course of a couple of years. We'll wait and see now if it costs anybody else their job in that organization, as the quarterback decisions often do, though.
And I'll tell you what, last year we saw 6 go in the first round. And you know, while the back end of that, Bo Nix was considered, was he really a first rounder? But he's playing well now for the Denver Broncos. This draft class is not considered a great draft class and is not as deep as last year's draft class. There's going to be more teams looking for quarterbacks than quarterbacks available, or not, I should say available, that are worthy first-round draft picks. So it's going to get real interesting in the offseason.
It's also going to make the veteran market really interesting. Like, again, we're talking about the quarterback future for teams like the New York Giants, still teams like the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young. And what if some of these young guys that had failed in certain spots are all of a sudden on the move and maybe get to go do that Sam Darnold car wash backup for a year at one of the Shanahan-McVay spots and then all of a sudden get another try? It's going to be fascinating to see the game of musical chairs, because you're right. We have got need and not a lot of supply in a market with a ton of demand there at that position, which makes the situation for the Chicago Bears very interesting because they've got the quarterback. Now they're trying to figure out everything else. So coming up next, we'll visit with Courtney Cronin and talk about the fallout from the decision made yesterday in Chicago and where the Bears need to go from here. Next on GoJo and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. So much going on in the NFL, particularly with the Chicago Bears in the last 24 to 48 hours. So to sort through all of that and figure out where they go next, delighted to bring in ESPN Bears reporter COURTNey Cronin, kind of give us some time this morning. COURTNey, how you doing?
I am great. How are you two?
Good. I'm doing well. I'd imagine my phone is not quite as close to melting as yours is. So take me back to the last 24 hours here and just what you've seen and heard from around the Bears organization that went into this decision to fire Shane Waldron and what the reaction has been around that building to this news.
I'm going to do you one better here. I'm going to take you back to last Monday after the Arizona game where Matt Eberflus kind of flippantly said, no, like we're not making a coordinator change. That was the game where they scored 9 points, all thanks to Cairo Santos. And the offense looked putrid coming off that Washington game. So Eberflus says last Monday, no change in coordinator. And then the Patriots game happens. And all options are on the table at that point. But it was kind of this weird, slow burn where Sunday we get that. Monday we get changes are coming. There's going to be adjustments made. Stay tuned. Not telling you what they are until Tuesday when they ultimately fire Shane Waldron. And frankly, this is kind of the way it's been with Eberflus, because you go back to January when he fired Luke Getsy and 4 members of the offensive coaching staff. That came 3 days after they lost to Green Bay. So apparently Eberflus just needs a little extra time each of these times to sort through all the pieces. Instead of making the decision that had become so obvious that they were going to end up going this route, because the offense just is not in a good place right now, and you run the risk of ruining your rookie quarterback, your #1 overall pick, your investment that you want to see pan out by not making a change quickly enough.
Now, a coach is an easy thing to change. Your #1 pick in his rookie year, a little different. And certainly it's not all on Caleb Williams. I mean, there's not a great team around him, which we all thought Ryan Poles had put a hell of a team around him, maybe not on the offensive line, but he's reverted or he regressed. Last 3 games, completion percentage 41%, 53%, 53%, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Now, the last 3 games, he's been sacked 18 times. In the first 6 games, he was sacked 20 times. So the last 3 have been awful. What is the thought of sitting him and letting him kind of take a breath?
It's a good question, and I think it's one that needs to repeatedly be asked if we see the same sort of result from Caleb Williams, even with the coordinator switch from Shane Waldron to Thomas Brown. But on Monday, Matt Eberflus said Caleb's our starter. No change at the quarterback position. And I think you probably have to give this a couple games. Green Bay coming up this weekend, then Minnesota the following weekend, to see does Thomas Brown unlock something? Does he put Caleb Williams in a more advantageous position to get some easy completions, to start getting the ball rolling? Because that's just, when you're averaging, below 3.5 yards per play, it's just not going to work. And we all know the sack numbers, that they do run the risk of breaking the rookie quarterback. I asked Caleb about that last week, and just the fear that it could break your confidence. And, he's going to put some of the onus on himself. A quarterback's never usually going to throw his offensive line under the bus. Some of it is based, like these sacks he's taking are based on flaws that he has not been able to work out of his game just yet, holding onto the ball too long. He has 36 dropbacks where he's held onto the ball 5 or more seconds and been pressured on 92 of those, and 15 sacks have come in those situations. He knows that some of that's his doing, but the rest of it, like you mentioned with the offensive line, if it doesn't get better, you've got to wonder about, maybe we need a reset. Maybe there's a change that needs to happen just on a temporary basis, so you don't totally ruin this guy in his rookie year before he even has a chance to get his career off the ground.
There's certainly the focus on Caleb and the effect for him and being the #1 pick. That's understandable. There's also the rest of this locker room that, COURTNey, by NFL standards, unusually vocal in a lot of turns in this process. How would you describe the demeanor of this current Bears locker room at this juncture?
Openly frustrated. And you don't typically see the amount of players, like veteran voices, guys who don't necessarily have a gripe, but they're not happy with the direction that things are going, and they're not afraid to voice their opinion on it. You really saw that coming out of that Washington game where within the first 12, I guess, 24 hours after that game, you hear DJ Moore openly talking about the Doug Kramer fumble at the goal line. And I knew that play was up in the, on the play sheet. I'm not sure why we called in that situation. Kevin Byard questioning why they didn't send pressure, why they weren't, guarding the sideline on the play before the Hail Mary. There's Jalen Johnson. There's Cole Kmet talking about the way that they're practicing. Like, this doesn't feel normal, especially for a team that has gone through so many ups and downs in the early part of the season. And it's even beyond that, like week 3. So Shane Waldron was hired in Chicago for a number of different reasons. The Bears had a pretty exhaustive search. They interviewed 9 candidates, including Waldron. So 6 guys total, including Waldron, ended up getting OC jobs. Waldron in Chicago, 5 coordinators elsewhere. And they love Shane Waldron because of his ability to teach, to communicate, to game plan, and then explain that game plan to the offense, especially having a rookie quarterback who he was going to have to guide his development. And then you're hearing week 3 after the Indy loss that the offensive leadership group went to Waldron and said, coach us harder. That's not usually the sign of things going great when you have players saying, we're not getting it, and it's because we don't think you're being hard enough on us. And, there's always the pendulum swing between players saying I'm being coached too hard and then players saying coach us harder. So where's the happy medium to that? But you could just tell for weeks now that something wasn't right. Something didn't smell right about this. And that was reflected in how players talked about the team without getting super down on it. They felt like they still had a chance. Now they're 4-5. We'll see how they approach it, knowing they have Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit times 2. All 3 of those opponents they're going to see in the next 6 weeks twice. But through the first 9 games of the season, they were really honest that they just weren't thrilled with the direction that the team was going in.
Courtney, we've only got a couple of minutes left here. Speaking of the direction the team's going in, that daunting schedule you laid out, I mean, Matt Eberflus, is this a when, not if thing in terms of his job potentially being on the chopping block before the season's over?
It certainly feels like it. And whether it's before the season's over, whether it's in 2025, the Bears have to take a very hard look at themselves, people who are making a decision on whether the coach stays or goes and who they'd go after to replace Matt Eberflus. Is this really the direction that you want to go in? Because it extends beyond this season. Of course, Caleb's the centerpiece of all of this. Do you want to, are you guys on the right track with the quarterback? If you can't, without a shadow of a doubt, answer that question with yes, then you have to make a coaching change. But I'll bring it back to what I said at the top. We've gone through this before as reporters. We've seen now 2 offensive coordinators fired in the same calendar year. Can't forget, last time I was on this show, we were talking about the Alan Williams strange resignation. David Walker fired for some misconduct reasons a couple weeks after that, their old running backs coach. That all falls on Matt Eberflus, who he's showing you he has an issue with picking the right people to be on his staff.
Well, Courtney, to that point, hopefully we can have you back another time soon when there's good news going on in Chicago and things are going really well and they've turned this ship around. But in the meantime, we appreciate all the time and insight on this situation. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, Courtney.
Courtney
Mike,
Cronin again.
I'm
Check her out,
telling you
doing a
how
great
this is
job
going-
covering this Bears team over at ESPN. Go ahead, Dad.
I tell you how this is going to go. They have the Packers, the Vikings, the Bears. It's not going to go well for them. And what's going to happen is players start to get self-preservation mode. They're going to start looking past and not listening to Eberflus anymore because they know he's going to be gone. It is going to be all about how do I maintain my spot on the team and in the league. That's the direction the Bears are headed.
Yeah, it's, and I mean, based on what Courtney's talked about there, the way that guys are really openly questioning the authority of the coach, which more common now than it was years ago for a million reasons, but that openly to talk not only about what's going on with Shane Waldron, who got, out of the paint now, but Matt Eberflus, who's still there, pretty telling about the future of this organization and how they're going to have to try and go shuffle this deck to try and make the best out of Caleb Williams. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, the third. 3 quick stories to send you to the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Make sure you subscribe to the GoJo and Golic YouTube channel. It is new. It is all of our content under one umbrella. No changes, obviously, with the folks at DraftKings. Got the great gear on to show it today, but just everything a lot easier to find with our one page. We passed the 500 subscriber mark, and we thank everybody who's done that, hit the bell, and rocked with us here live 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. But if you got to miss us live or any of our great guests, and thank you to Mike Williams, new Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver, Mark Schlabach, ESPN college football reporter, and our friend COURTNEY CRONIN, who's just stopped by, ESPN Bears reporter. If you missed any of those interviews, check them out wherever you get our podcast or right here on the GoJo and Golic YouTube channel as soon as we get done. This, that, and the third is brought to you by Knockaround. Knockaround, head to knockaround.com right now. Use code GoJo Golic and pick up your new go-to pair of polarized shades, like we all do each and every time we get to don them on here. Everyone looks great, feels great, and what you're looking at right now, the beautiful faces in front of you, protected both from the sun's rays and from looking like a lame, done for low, low prices that aren't going to break the bank, aren't going to break the wallet, and sunglasses are going to hold up against the test of time. You don't have to feel bad about going and actually knocking these around. They're ready for it, and so are you. So again, head to knockaround.com, use code GoJo Golic, go get you a new polarized pair of sunglasses. They have supported us since day one. Please help go and support them. Speaking of someone who's going to be able to afford a lot of knockaround sunglasses, Dad, let's get to this and this, that, and the third, as right now, MLB free agency starting to become some of the conversation between agents and the ownership of teams. And if you look this year, Juan Soto has a chance to be a crown jewel, the likes of which we've really never seen in terms of a hitter of his caliber entering true free agency. Among players with at least 3,000 plate appearances through their age 25 seasons, he is on a list with some pretty rare company in terms of OPS plus leaders. Number 1 is Ty Cobb, followed by Mickey Mantle, Mike Trout, Jimmy Fox, Albert Pujols, Tris Speaker, Rogers Hornsby, and then Juan Soto at 8 in front of Joe freaking DiMaggio. 7 of those 10 players existed before, played before free agency existed, and Trout and Pujols obviously signed long-term extensions before they ever got to the market as young players. So, Dad, this pretty rare air where, according to Jeff Passan and others, we're probably talking about something that's going to reset the longest deal ever made in MLB history that right now I believe is held by Fernando Tatis at 14 years, $340 million. We're talking about probably in excess of $600 million. And right now the teams lining up meetings with him look like the Toronto Blue Jays, who were in the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes, remember, kind of cryptically last time, as well as the Red Sox and then the Mets and Yankees that are really expected to go toe-to-toe with this. So ultimately, Dad, you think he winds up back with the Yankees team where he played pretty well this year and a chance for a World Series appearance in his belt?
Well, I mean, listen, the whole object of the Yankees is to they spend a lot of money, but it's to win World Series, not just get to World Series. So it wouldn't shock me. The guy's 25, right? I mean, you used to see these 10-year deals to players that were like over 30, where they knew the back half of the deal was going to be a waste. It was more for the front end of the deal. But now you're seeing longer-term deals for younger players, which makes way more sense. You know, a 10-year deal for Soto puts him at 35, not pushing 40. So now it could go longer than 10 years. I don't know if the value will reach Ohtani's $700 million, but he's going to be the highest paid free agent this year for sure. You got to believe the Yankees are right in it, right? I mean, money seems to be no object. At some point, it's got to become an object. But we've seen them spend money before, but we've seen these other teams, and there's the haves and the have-nots, and we know who they are. So the haves are going to be in it for them.
Yep, certainly hard to see the Boston Red Sox as real players in this, given how they've spent or really not spent in recent years. A lot of the other teams in this, I do think it's going to be the New York teams that really come down to the wire. Steve Cohen, we know, has been adamant about trying to build the antidote to them in the New York Mets. So fascinating to see, but young man getting paid and certainly looks like he is going to do just that. Jesse, let's get to that right now. Caitlin Clark apparently enjoying her offseason.
One of those athletes that seems to be good at everything. Apparently, she's really good at golf, too. She's been known to hit the links, and now she's playing in an LPGA Pro-Am. So, guys, what do you think? Apparently, ticket sales have already seen a boost with the announcement of her in that, something we're very familiar with, the Caitlin Clark effect.
Wow.
Yeah, not surprised by this one at all, Dad. Caitlin Clark is, again, we've seen the swing before, way too good at all this stuff, but I'm seeing the video right now, and it's so true. The bravery of anyone hitting with an actual gallery around them off the tee is something that I can just never approach. You've gotten to play at the American Century Tournament in Tahoe the last couple of years. You've sort of lived this life here. Even for an athlete like Caitlin Clark, who's been in these situations, you who played 9 years in the NFL, how daunting is that?
Well, let me tell you, I played in front of more of a crowd when I was doing Mike and Mike at ESPN. Green and I did the show a couple of times before the Houston Open. And we played in the Pro-Am. We did the show Wednesday morning and then played in the Pro-Am. And there is plenty of people lined up. And I mean, you just are like, people, we are not professionals. Now, luckily, I put it down in the fairway both times I golfed, and it had to be pure luck. But there are people around almost all your shots. And yes, it is without a doubt daunting because it's not my comfort level. It's on the football field. Caitlin Clark's is on the basketball court, though she swings a stick incredibly well. She's going to be playing alongside number 1 ranked Nelly Korda. So, I mean, that's some power right there. But it's unbelievable playing with professional golfers. I mean, because we golf at one tee and they're back at the tips. And the way the pros hit the ball is when you're up close and personal is just unbelievable. But yes, to your point, it is a very, very daunting task to try not to hit somebody.
Yeah, I would say that's the case. I do appreciate that's why when we see other athletes from other sports go into that venue, I remember so vividly watching the match when Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen were playing Aaron Rodgers and whoever he was teamed up with. And at one point, Mahomes is hitting from over in the rough, and he's telling the fans, you need to move. We are not professionals. We will hit you. So that level of honesty is something that we all need in some of those dire moments here. So again, cool group there. She's going to be with Nelly Korda and Annika Sorenstam, who's hosting that tournament. So awesome group of some incredible star power. But Jesse, speaking of star power, let's get to the third. People magazine has named their sexiest man alive, and I have questions.
It's John Krasinski, okay? And if you've seen Jack Ryan, you wouldn't have that many questions, okay? He can hang, all right? But my big thing is nobody's the sexiest man alive while Henry Cavill lives. Sorry, it's him.
Well, I mean, look at the year that Glenn Powell's had in the lead up to this, too. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know if John Krasinski can best a man who I watched dry hump a tornado in the Twister sequel.
Listen,
I just don't think it's possible.
Glenn Powell is sexy. I totally agree. But he's also kind of goofy looking. Like, he's just like I feel like I could run into somebody, I could go grab lunch across the street and run into someone who looks like him.
Is it because someone said that Glenn Powell looks like a capybara one time, and now when he smiles, that's all people can think of?
Yeah, maybe. That could be it.
Listen, who knows what goes into it? They say sexiest man alive. It's not always the best looking guy. We know that. I don't know what their criteria is. Their criteria changes daily like the college football committee's criteria changes daily. I'm a fan of Krasinski. I like him a lot. I like his acting. I certainly like him in comedy and in serious. I think he does a great job. But who the hell knows what the standards are for this? I don't even know who votes. I don't even know how many people vote.
Yeah, Blake Shelton won the other year.
Again, what the data points are. Who knows?
Horrible.
I don't care.
That is true. Why haven't we demanded more transparency in the People's Sexiest Person of the Year voting when we go and run through sports with a fine-tooth comb and find out these processes? I want to know who's on the 13-person sexy committee.
We have to know.
All I know is the next sexiest woman alive has to be Jessie and her mugshot passport picture.
Oh, my God,
yeah.
Me? Stop. Say more.
Uh-huh.
Yes, coming
we'll
to a
submit that
magazine
for
stand
consideration.
near you.
Yeah.
Yes. Please submit this photo for review, a magazine stand near you, or the next true crime extraordinaire. Either way, at this point, it could go. We hope either way you choose to download, subscribe, rate, and review this show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.